enjoying a few well-earned comforts.
Hello, Grumsworth.
Hello, Burlokk.
And hello to all of you, our fine assemblage of listeners, to the Preambull, your every so often digest of all things hobby.
That's right. That is exactly what it's going to be for you guys this week. We're going to be opening up our decrepit old hobby journals once more. So you can have a little peek around, rummage inside their pages. We're going to have a little bit of an exploration of the mountains of Faerun. We've been adventuring, haven't we?
You have, yeah.
We have. And then we're going to take a slight detour and we're going to butcher a flying lamb. What do you think to that, Burlokk?
That sounds quite exciting.
Yeah? It's got butterfly wings, everyone.
Oh,
so
perfect.
Make of that what you will. So let's pop open that hobby journal and see what Burlock's been up to this week.
Me? Oh, goodness.
Go on, you. Yeah.
So it's been a blast from the past.
Has it now?
Yeah, as most of my hobby is, to be fair. I played a game of 40k, second edition 40k.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I played it with somebody who, a good friend of mine, who isn't how you'd say one of the Oldman's gang.
He's not one of the Oldman's gang.
He's one of Newman's gang, but a very fine fellow.
Okay.
Who was very open to the idea. Yeah, very open to the idea of playing an older version of the game that he's come to love recently. So he loves himself some of the 8th edition 40k. He's going to be throwing himself full throttle into 9th. But I took his foot off the gas and said, "Come back in time with me."
Yeah.
Let's play a game from the hallowed pages of Games Workshop's past in an old version of 40k. And the good thing about playing older versions of these games is that we've all got the miniatures anyway.
Yeah.
And just write up a new army list. Familiarise yourselves with the rules if you can. If not, have a go with someone like myself who's played an awful lot of second edition 40k over the years. Yeah, and we had a go. He came over one afternoon. It was a lovely day. We set out a 6x4 table.
Okay. Yeah.
Lots of scenery on there. Some of the scenery that I've shown off proudly on some past episodes of the Preamble.
Proudly.
So we got to actually use the scenery that I've made. More on the way there as well. More scenery on the way, which I'll be happy to share with you in the weeks to come.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I used my Space Marines. I fielded my own chapter, the Celestial Knights, painted in purple and bone, a successor chapter of the Dark Angels. Given that they are a chapter of my own devising, I could quite happily use them as a successor for any chapter.
That's truth. Yeah.
Provided I've got the WYSIWYG for it,
Of course.
Which is what you see is what you get, of course, for those who don't know. Well, WYSIWYG is if your character is equipped with a certain piece of war gear, it should probably be on the model somewhere.
That's right. If this guy's wandering around with the fabled sergeant wielding a heavy bolter, if he's got that, that's what he uses. That's no
what he uses
gun.
in game. It's not a chainsword and bolt pistol. So I used my Space Marines, and he took a contingent 1,000 points of Imperial Guard. And so, of course, he told me that, well, if you're Dark Angels, you're obviously one of the fallen lot, aren't you? And you're a bit traitorous. And I said, no. You lot are a bunch of traitor guard, obviously. So there we are. That sets the scene for the game,
Yeah, it's good.
And so we chose our missions, as you do in Second Ed 40k. Had the equivalent of line breaker. He had to get some of his miniatures into my deployment zone. I had a taken hold objective, so I had to claim a certain area of the battlefield and hold it.
That's quite nice.
He fielded 2 Lehman Russ battle tanks against my Space Marines, and I didn't have a lot of tank stopping power other than a dreadnought. Really, I mean, the assault cannons in Second Ed 40k, which was strapped to one of the arms of the dreadnought, it's a bit of a beast. It rolls 3 sustained fire dice. As a dreadnought, it gets to ignore the first jam that it rolls.
I remember them being that's a hell cannon, isn't it?
Good for chewing through units of infantry. It's not got a huge amount of tank stopping power though. So of course I've got
okay.
a tactical squad split into 2 combat squads. One of which has got a plasma gun and crack grenades. The other half has got a sergeant with a power fist and some crack grenades. So I've got a way to I've got to get close to these tanks to take them out.
Yeah.
But I ended up, scratching a victory together quite solidly actually by the end of it.
Bravely done, brother.
Yeah,
Nicely
it was good, and but it wasn't so much of a tabling that he was put off wanting to play again, which was nice.
That's good news. Yeah, because
Yeah.
that's always horrible, isn't it? It's especially when you're playing something, 1,000 points. That's a nice game. It's enough in any edition, really, that you can get the game played out fairly quickly.
It's not so. I mean, I think 1,500 probably is the best size to play if you want to get a game done in sort of a half an afternoon. But we took our time with this game, so it took us about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. But we was enjoying each other's company as well. Plus, I was explaining a lot of the rules as we were going, of course, which was nice because I didn't have to explain the core concepts of this is a D6, this is a tape measure, this is how far these guys move. He understood a lot of the basic lingo, so it wasn't so much of a leap that it was a brand new experience, although the game rules being as different as they are to how they used to be was nice. The way I described it to him in a nutshell was your entire army acts as a massive group of individuals as opposed to set squads and units. It was very much dependent on the direction that each miniature within a squad was facing to determine their line of sight. So that was the main tack I took with explaining second ed 40k, is that each of your guys are independent. They still have to function as a squad and obey the rules of how squads work, but think of them as individual guys. So make sure you're at the facing of your miniatures is careful. You're careful with that. When casualties are removed from a round of shooting, for example, you only take the guys closest to the unit that's shooting. So really, you really have to think about the micro as well as the macro style play when it comes to that edition of 40k. So there are some obvious bits that are a bit, hang on a minute, that rule's a little bit broken, or that particular war gear card. I remember there was a particular strategy card that came out with the Dark Millennium expansion set, which was mostly focused on the psychic phase and the psychers and all that sort of thing.
Yes, yeah.
But they also released a set of strategy cards that you could use to play when, a bit like stratagems, I think, as they've become in the more recent versions.
In the modern day,
yeah. And I think one was called Virus Outbreak. One essentially went off at a point that you chose, and that's where the virus broke out. And if you were lucky with your dice rolls, this virus could chain through an entire squad, multiple squads, essentially your whole army. It was very, very quick to just totally decimate an army. And I think in one of the White Dwarfs, I think it was one where Jake Thornton was the editor.
Dear old Jake.
Yeah, with old Stephen Astoff and Ian Pickstock. Do you remember that gang?
Yeah.
I think they said, take your virus outbreak card, all you 40k gamers, and shred it, burn it, blow it up somehow, get rid of it. We should never have written that card. So with second ed 40k, there were some very obvious mistakes, I want to say, but there were some imbalances, shall we say? That's a better way of putting it. But either way, the game was great fun. And he had a great time, and he wants to play again. That's the thing.
There you go. Yeah. So that means it shook out lovely, didn't it? If he wants to come back and play again, I really like the idea of bringing someone who's invested and engaged with the current edition, and then saying that you do know that this is, being as we're up to 8th and now 9th edition of 40k, there's a wealth of 40k games to choose from now and systems, and they don't necessarily change massively per edition, but looking back from where we are now with it to those early days, first, second, third, it is like playing a different game, right?
Yeah, it really is. It really is. The strategies change, points values change, your army organization changes. So you really have to put a brand new hat on each time you play another version of 40k.
It's really undergone a great many changes over its
time. It has, and I find, you're right, and I find that every edition really has its own charm.
It does, they do all have their own charm. You're right.
Yeah, that's part of the fun. That's part of the evolution of the game.
It is,
and that's one of the things that keeps people engaged in the hobby, keeps me involved in the hobby, is the evolution of these rule systems. You know, the core elements, the fluff, the armies involved, they're all the same. Some, the tower, for example, they came out of nowhere. So things will be introduced, taken out. There may be, I heard some vicious rumors that the squats may be returning. I don't know.
Those are not vicious rumours, Burlokk.
They will be more than welcome in my eyes.
Well, actually, it will lead in slightly to the hobby pages, even, of my own journal. Well, so there has been a little bit of paint to brush action, a tiny bit more work, but it has been, I don't know, maybe only a couple of hours at most, just getting a little bit more work done on my Necromunda game, the Knights of Doghead. Hopefully soon I will be able to show them off as a complete game. So we're not gonna go there, but I got a little bit more paint on those guys. They're nearing completion. We're near the final push, right?
Very good.
Yeah. But so speaking about 40k there, I've been having a little look over the new edition, 9th there. It's kind of rules changes, the general kind of direction that the game seems to have been moved in.
Yep.
And it's quite, having said previously on this hallowed ground, the Preambull podcast, having said I will never paint a large army ever again. I've started to and ah.
Oh, you haven't?
I have, Burlokk, I have, with 9th edition, because it looks like it's moved a little bit more towards the sort of game that I could enjoy playing. There's going to be less crazy kind of min-maxing sort of builds for armies, because I like to play like a narrative game and things like this and stuff. Games that are not terribly well balanced, I can enjoy those.
Yeah.
But I like to know that at some point in there is a healthy tournament scene that you can take your army of choice along to, and whatever race you've chosen, whatever combination of units you've chosen, I like there to be a chance that it can do well competitively. It doesn't have to be like an absolute nightmare that just tables people on every occasion. But I'd like to bring an army that looks like an army, rather than 4 or 5 Imperial Knights, 10 Guardsmen scuttling around, and a random couple of Blood Angels captains. This doesn't.
At that point, though, even if they were painted to exceptional standards, just that mixture of miniatures that somehow is even legal as a choice in the game.
That's the problem.
It just wouldn't do it for me at all. Sorry.
No, nor I. And that's why I didn't touch 8th or 7th or 6th with a barge pole. Just not interested in that sort of play. 9th looks to have moved more along the lines, sort of thematic ones. It looks like you can build your armies in the way that might be plausible in a science fiction kind of universe. There's once more there's a need for boots on the ground, so you're going to have infantry playing an important role rather than just sat at the back of the battlefield. Transports, heavy armor, your tanks and such, they all seem to have got a little bit of a buff as well, so I think people will be taking more of those. And the general structure with which you craft your army now, it seems much more open and sensible because of that. I've not played a game of it yet, but I've done a little bit of research, and I'm feeling quite positive about it. It's looking like it's going in a nice direction. So I've been sort of considering options, thoughts just drop into my, misfiring synapses, just like wake up one day, hang on, you should paint an Adeptus Mechanicum army. That's what you should do. Now then, what you need to do, you need to dissolve all of your assets to buy all these miniatures, and then you need to, break down all of your life relationships so you've got time to paint them all, right?
That's right, of course. I mean, that's the rite of passage into any new army, isn't it?
That's right, Burlokk. But then, then more stable thoughts enter my little old head, and I think to myself, okay, now hold your horses, Grumsworth. Let's not get silly with this. So I thought, there's quite a lot of armies out there that look quite pretty. I kind of like the theme of, and I could probably bash out a fairly, I'll say a quick paint job that I could enjoy having them on the table and get used to playing them, you know.
Maybe inspired by our last episode talking about the dip technique, perhaps.
Which I really like the idea of. And after that conversation, the 10 orc challenge is something that I think we should definitely do. Maybe for, maybe for the 10th episode of this Titanic endeavour.
Goodness, that far into the future.
That far into the future, brother. Yeah.
Well, I think I could get 10 orc boys dipped by then. Yeah. All right. It's on. Let's do it.
I scrubbed orcs right off the list. Yeah, I'm not into doing a horde army. Much as I like to play them, that's not something that I'd ever consider.
You need lots of models for a horde army. You want something more elite, more
massively, yeah. But I don't want Space Marines. Not because I don't love them, but I'm not interested in painting them. I quite like the idea of a small elite force of Harlequins. Quite tempted. Yeah. I think I know that they're kind of quite fancy looking, or they can be, but I've got a couple of colour scheme ideas for them. So I was looking at them, sort of thinking, yeah, I could probably get on board with these guys.
Yep.
I really like the Adeptus Mechanicum. So I was looking through their model range. I mean, there are some stinkers in there. There is some really bad stuff in there, I think, personally.
Yeah, I think I'm probably on the same level as you on that front.
Things with wings or shoddy-looking hovercrafts do not belong at the cradle of the Imperial's technological might. They're not meant to be there.
Yeah, if it's got sails on it or fabric. Yeah. If I ever had that miniature to paint, I would paint all the armor plates to look like wood.
I love it. Yeah, that would be a treat, wouldn't it? Okay, then. Yeah, so there's a couple of armies. It's not going to be Space Marines. It might be Harlequins. It might be Admech.
That'd be in your army composition, how you'd build it, get your army list drawn up before you go out and purchase whatever you wanted to get. Yeah.
Which is probably what I'm going to do anyway. But you never know. If suddenly a load of squats are released...
Oh, you're straight there.
I might be straight there, yeah.
You'll be behind me in the queue.
Dwarfs. I'll be jumping over your shoulders, Burlokk. That's what I'll be doing. Giving me squats. Imagine that. I reckon maybe by the time they release anything, squat-wise, we'll be up to episode 11. Yeah, so I've basically spent my time doing a lot of hobby thinking, which might not sound massively productive, but it's, added another layer of thoughts I need to work through. So it was kind of a week of loose planning, trying to get a perspective on an old a game that I used to play, and looking with fresh eyes on the new version of the system. And I think it'd be nice to engage with some players that I've not had a chance to play with before. People who've just been playing the recent editions. So it would be like a little bit of a new beginning into a hobby area that I had been before many years ago. But so this week we embarked on a hobby journey together, didn't we? Which was kind of like it required some planning, didn't it, brother? It also had a scattering of fresh meat, as you might say, fresh meat, and also a couple of seasoned types as well. Yeah. So we got together, didn't we, with a group of new and veteran players, and one veteran games master, who is my fine comrade opposite me there, looking shifty, suspicious.
As always.
Yeah. So Burlokk here run a one-shot Dungeons and Dragons game for us. And I think it's worth having a little chat with you guys, because it was quite interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, how it went, what we thought of the whole thing. We haven't really had much of a chance sort of debrief after the game, have we? So this probably actually could be like a live debrief, Grumsworth.
Rock and roll.
Yeah, we can talk about what we thought, what we liked, etc. Despised, if there was anything.
Oh, the list, Burlokk. The list.
Don't tell me. I've changed my mind.
So if we're having a debrief, there's a couple of things that I would ask you about it, I think.
Okay.
So just as a little bit of sort of background info here. There were 4 player characters and our fine games master, Mr. Burlokk here. 2 of us player characters were fairly seasoned at Dungeons and Dragons, but also other role-play games as well. And the other 2 players...
Yeah, never played a game before.
Just to mention, Burlokk here is a deeply experienced games master.
I can hold my own. I've played a lot of games, so I could say that I'm experienced enough to embark on this kind of thing. As you say, when you've got new players at the table, there are certain challenges involved with a table of that kind of dynamic.
So along those lines, I think like one of the things that I would like to know is how did you decide on the setting, bearing in mind that you've got a mixed bag experience-wise? Yeah, what was your thought process for conjuring up the setting?
I think when it comes to the setting, when you've got experience behind you, you can adapt very quickly to whatever the GM's thrown at you. You generally have an idea about what game you're playing, whether it be sci-fi, fantasy, or whatever. But for a new person, even those boundaries might be blurred. Okay, we're going to play a fantasy game. They might think laser guns and space aliens or whatever.
Yeah.
But I wanted to keep it familiar enough that a new player could immerse themselves in the world quite easily. So my approach initially when discussing it with our new players was that if you've ever seen The Lord of the Rings, it'll be a little bit like that, but potentially with just maybe a bit more magic. And then I thought, well, to save me having to develop my own world from scratch, because this is only going to be a one-shot game, which means a story that starts and finishes in the space of one evening or over one session of play. I thought, well, I'll use an environment, a world that's already been created. So I thought, well, what better than the Forgotten Realms? It's probably the most ubiquitous, the most commonly used for Dungeons and Dragons. And the Forgotten Realms is basically set on the continent of Faerun. So people that might have played Baldur's Gate as a computer game, the term Forgotten Realms will be familiar to you. That's where that was set. I thought, well, we'll keep it outside of a big bustling city because there's an awful lot of interactions that can happen. You can easily lose track of things in a city. So I thought I'll keep it a little bit more confined. Small village in the mountains to the north of Faerun, the world's spine mountains where it was set, and said, well, this is where it will begin. So it was kept quite small, fairly compact, in an already existing world where there was plenty for me to draw from and adapt as I saw fit. So it meant that my workload wasn't so huge, basically.
Yeah. That's really sensible. Yeah.
And having that dynamic there meant that a group of 4 adventurers, I think a lot of my choices sort of hinged on what kind of characters you were going to be. And you knew also that we were going to be playing with brand new players, didn't you? Did that have much of an impact on you for your character creation?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, actually quite strongly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So knowing that, so I played at tables like that before, where you've got that kind of mix of more and less experienced players.
Yeah.
I think it's, from my point of view, obviously I wanted to pick a character that I would enjoy playing. So I started to lock that into place. I thought, I've had this sort of idea for a character for some time. I like the kind of mechanics behind this character. But I'd also like to be in a position that I could lend like role play assistance as well as game mechanical help to the new players as well. So it's useful if your character can be one of the more louder, or at least the more conversant, more chatty, maybe slightly more charismatic, not necessarily nice or charming, because this can encourage newer players to see what is possible as far as the talking side goes. I think it's a good way to bring others into the sort of immersive nature of a role play game like Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that was probably the key thing that I ended up thinking about. I ended up tailoring my character to be enjoyable for myself to play, but also he was in a position where if someone was unsure of how they should act or just wanted to keep their own dialogue quite minimal, this particular character could step in and fill the breach if needed.
If needed.
It's fine if you just drop out of character and say, and just give sort of a friendly hint, say, well, you could say something like this, try this at this point.
That's
but
right.
I think it's nice if you can sort of preempt that sort of behavior, continue to stick to your role play character to oil the wheels.
And what character were you? What did you decide on in the end?
Well, he was a fair old treat. So he was a satyr barbarian. So what better than a sort of a randy, drunken, naked, hoofed, bearded boy wielding a club who likes to rush into battle in the nude.
Yeah.
That for me sold it. It was like, yeah, I'm totally there. This is the character I'm going to play here.
That's it, yeah.
And in truth, he could have been a little bit more. He could have been louder and more obnoxious and more drunken and a little bit more wild. But I also felt that I didn't have to play the character up too hard there, and then force people to sort of come through him if they wanted to get into the conversation. So he was a nice character to play in between the other players' sections, I suppose.
Yeah. Initially, we were just going to stick to the classes and races just from the player's handbook.
Yes,
And I was quite keen to do that quite strictly, because it meant things, again, were kept quite simple. We only needed to refer to one book or one set of notes or whatever it might be. But one of our new players, of course, wanted to play almost like a deer-style centaur elf.
Yes.
If you are familiar with World of Warcraft, we probably be able to throw an image up. But the dryads from World of Warcraft are just like this. They're not like the centaurs, half horse, half man. It was a little bit more elegant, a bit more dainty, a bit more elfish, a bit more sylvan.
She was, yeah.
And since it was a brand new player's idea and request, I thought, well, I'll do my best to honour it. So that immediately we were straying away from the bog standard rules, from the player's handbook. But that wasn't a problem. I just managed to tweak a bit of the movement value around as far as the game mechanics were concerned, because the player herself, she did say, "Oh, he's not going to cause any problems, is it?" It's like, no, of course not. So I just, behind the scenes, ratcheted a little bit up there and ratcheted it a little bit down there. And what I changed was the fact that the elves can rest without needing proper sleep, so you can have something called the trance.
Very handy.
So I took that away from her character and just gave her more of a movement speed. Which was quite nice. It was very quick, very simple solution to the problem. But so that, of course, opened up the idea of, well, since we've got a new player playing a faun, a centaur style character, you decided on the satyr, which fitted nicely because both sylvan kind of creatures worked quite well, I think.
Yeah, we all like a little bit of a dance and a stomp around in the woods, don't we?
That's it. Yeah.
In real life as well, but
well, of course.
So that's really interesting that you kind of scrapped your plans to work with the most simplest form of the characters and tailor what you're working with to their expectations or their wants. I want to play a character who's kind of like a half deer type character, and you were like, yep, can sort that out for you.
Sounds cool, actually. Let's give that a go.
Yeah, and it was, and it worked really well. Bearing in mind the idea of keeping things kind of more towards the book and more in a straight line, how did you sort of set the difficulty for the adventure, the complexity even actually as well?
I mean, with regard to sort of the difficulty of the mechanics and the encounters that were strung along the way, actually what I knew from the beginning was that I would keep it quite easy. It wouldn't really pose much of a mechanical challenge for your characters to best the villains, the creatures in this thing. I mean, there was elements of the narrative that certainly hinted that there was something that you absolutely could not defeat. So with regards to the story, certainly there were powers at play that you had no chance of overcoming. But certainly with the adventure itself and how it kicked off and how you began role-playing and chaining together the events, you went into this small village. After going into the inn, the blacksmith or the carpenter of the town burst in. My daughter's been stolen away. She's disappeared. They've taken her. Who was it? You have to go and investigate. So off you went. You just got to follow him back to his home, do some basic investigation with a few rolls, and quickly discover that the tracks belong to some goblins. and you worked out the direction they went in, which was towards the forest. So that was
And
sort of
that
the
was
first basic encounter, but it was enough of
yeah.
a
It was a
okay,
nice run-in, wasn't it?
yeah, and there was enough sort of rolling of dice. Oh, make an investigation roll. You know, make
Yeah,
a
yeah.
make you know, a persuasion roll to see if you can get some more information out of this guy and what he knows, that kind of thing. And the idea then of discovering the anatomy of the character sheet, which to a new player again it can be quite bewildering, I imagine. All these numbers thrown at you, skills and little dots you have to color in, and
Think about when you first saw one.
I didn't know where to
The
look at the
first,
beginning. You know,
absolutely, yeah.
they are. I remember the first thing I remember seeing on the character sheet was, oh look, I can draw a picture of my character.
And that still remains one of my favourite parts of those character sheets. You know, give me an open blank space, I can draw some of their war gear,
Yeah,
or a little portrait, or where they lived. You know,
that's right. And
stuff like that.
if you're clever enough, and I know your skills at drawing are particularly good, you wouldn't even need any numbers. You could just tell all their stats by how well they're drawn.
Yeah.
I digress. So we had the moment where, you know, the first encounter essentially is just finding out some information. So your dice rolls go in there. It's quite simple, quite easy. There was no majorly difficulty classes, because obviously as a GM,
No.
I'm there to set the dice roll number required to beat, and the degree of the pass and fail as well, which the dice obviously determine.
Yeah, how impressive your success is, or
Yeah.
how abysmal your failure is.
Exactly. How slowly you took, how long it took you to discover the tracks of the goblins, or how instantly you found them.
Yeah.
So that allowed for not only a little bit more role play in that village setting, but it also ramped up the sort of the drama a little bit. You know, allowed the
It
narrative to
really
go in a
did
bit more
as
of a
well.
new
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah.
You know, that suddenly the change of pace was in there.
That speaks to the fact that you've considered that you don't want this to be aggressively difficult. You don't want the players to suddenly hit kind of a wall. You don't want them walking in. Well, in this scenario, in this setting, you didn't want them walking into a fight that they really had to struggle to win. You didn't want them to have to work out complex puzzles, or really dense dialogue choices just for them to further. It felt like a really nicely laid out kind of curve of difficulty.
Yeah.
You know, it gently got harder. You know, it became more and more complex, I think is the right word. You know, there were more options slowly presented as you unfolded the narrative.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But our group, we followed these tracks to the edges of a fairly grim-looking forest, as I recall there.
That's right. Yeah.
And we found ourselves upon a fairly grim-looking structure. What I really enjoyed at the time, it was very like a classic sort of dark dungeon situation.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, oh, this is so cool that these people are experiencing this for the first time, and this is some of the sort of classic heart of the game, isn't it? And the foes we finally found in there were pretty excellently classic. I really liked that as well, because I thought our new players are getting the kind of classic experience, you know, given to them in a really artful, nice way. But also those of us at the table that were more veteran players, there was enough there for us to get our teeth into as well.
So you went through the forest, you ended up going through the cold, you know, snowy forest, following the tracks, losing them at one point, re-finding them, and then you end up going up a large hill to the edge of the forest, and you see a tomb, a ruined tomb.
That's right, it was ruined, yeah.
You know, across a bit of a clearing. That opens up then that nice moment. Again, I considered this bit like an encounter.
Cinematic.
Yeah, it was quite cinematic, I guess. Yeah, that's kind of how I think when I try and describe what's going on. I almost picture it as if it's a scene in a film. I almost saw this moment when you then are faced with, what do we do? How do we approach this? Because there's about 100 yards of clearing between where we are and where we need to be. So that, in my mind, was an encounter, and I was fully expecting, which you did perfectly, for the seasoned players to say, well, let's put a plan together then. Let's see what's going to happen. Do we wait? Do we wait to see if there's a patrol? Do we hang around here and or do we just rush them? Do we create a diversion, which I think was your choice in the end?
It was.
But that gave enough of an indication that actually there is no set formula to how you have to solve a problem in Dungeons and Dragons for the new players again. So the whole way through, every encounter really was kind of thought out and designed to be with a new player in mind.
Yeah. As I will say, while that's the case, that there was still enough detail and interest and weave of the story that it didn't feel like you had made a sort of a soft play area version of Dungeons and Dragons. It still felt like our characters could lose their wealth, their lives even. It felt that we were going somewhere dangerous. It felt that the odds were not necessarily in our favour.
Yeah. Secretly behind the scenes, obviously they
almost
were. There was obviously the chance that 2 or 3 of them might get a lucky critical hit. But I mean, bearing in mind we had a Dragonborn Warlock.
We did.
One of our new players was playing a Dragonborn Warlock.
And he did a solid job, didn't he?
He did a very good job, yeah. We had you with the Satyr Barbarian. We had the Fawn, should we say Centaur?
Who also did a very good. Everyone played really well, I thought, actually.
And then our Elven...
our High Elf.
Yeah, our High Elf Sorcerer. And I like the fact that the High Elf Sorcerer he got his sorcerer's power from his draconic bloodline, which tied him in a way to the Dragonborn
really
player.
Nicely. Yeah.
And then your Sylvan Satyr was tied to the Sylvan Dryad.
Fawn. Yeah,
which was quite nice. I like the dynamic there.
It added a nice amount of symmetry to the party, didn't it?
That's it. Yeah. And so you all the way along, you're able to ad lib some role play. There's some obvious things where you can role play with, but there were also moments where you were posed with almost like a blank slate, and off you go with some role
which
play.
Is lovely.
I was quite impressed actually with a lot of that, and I remember issuing out some inspiration points for some of those moments, which were really nice to see from a GM's perspective. It's certainly nice to have your players involve themselves almost off their own volition into a situation.
The story that you've crafted, though, isn't it?
Yeah, because it means that I've given a canvas with enough detail that they can then embellish further. But when you see those kind of moments, or when you're playing along, when you were playing with this, what helped you decide on the most appropriate moments to kind of to go into those moments of deeper role play, and allows sort of those moments where it allows the rest of the table to get to know your character a little bit? How did you decide on those moments?
So most of it, or a large chunk of it, certainly was based upon, I really wanted to accommodate and give space and room to our new players there. But obviously also wanted them to, and everyone at the table, to understand the character that I was playing.
Yeah.
So it was nice right at the beginning for you to give everyone the chance to describe their character's physical appearance.
That's right, yeah.
And maybe a little bit about their background, if they so chose.
That's right, yeah.
So that was a good bit to sort of get the character locked in. Then myself, I found there were lots of good opportunities to get my character across. I had to some of them I sort of lent a bit harder into, because I thought, okay, this sounds like a situation where I've got the space to play this character without it cutting off other people's opportunities to get involved.
Yeah.
That was a tiny bit of an enjoyable kind of juggling act there, because the character that I'd selected was kind of quite a sort of, by nature, pretty sort of fame hungry, and kind of the guy who wants to get stuck in quite early, and his personality would have, in almost all the situations we came across, would have had him right at the front. Yammering away.
It was never in a jarring way, though, was it? It wasn't.
No. Well, this was
sort of interrupting proceedings almost, just to get your moment in there, because it was. It almost seemed like it just flowed really naturally.
Well, that was a little bit of that was because I think it's a really useful thing to be able to do as a player and a GM, is to have just a gentle sort of read of the situation, to think, okay, like I know there are some the other players in my party have skills which might be useful for this particular encounter. Like, I'm not going to go in there and start clattering around on my hooves, dancing around, yelling, swinging my club around, when what could happen here is one of them could step forward and bring their particular skill set in and solve this problem. So in those sort of situations, what I did is I wanted to keep the character going. So at that point, he would do the sort of satyr thing by, he would look around, grab those last mugs of mead before they headed out of the tavern.
Take him with
He
him.
would start singing a high song as he wandered on, exactly like this, yeah. So I was still doing satyr things in character, but they weren't at the forefront of what was happening.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
And then there were moments where it was completely appropriate that the class that I had chosen, the barbarian, our only like hardcore melee character,
Yeah.
as soon as the combat situation came about, it was like, right, I can get stuck straight in here because this is what my character mechanically does as well.
And you did it
So
really well. You did it with gusto, in fact. In that first room you came into when you went
was nice,
down
wasn't it?
into that tomb,
Yeah,
and you encountered that group of goblins who were just, sharpening their
foul
weapons
goblins.
and lazing on their hammocks and things inside this room
They
they've
were as
managed to
well.
utilize. In you
Yeah.
went, steaming. Oh, there was a little plan that you devised as a group. I remember.
Yeah, which was, again, that was really nice because
Yeah.
we had our sort of a very clear thinking, slightly arrogant in the traditional elven way, sorcerer there, sort of laying out the plan, which was one of my favourite bits actually of the whole thing, because he did it in such a it just such a believable that his character would act like that. It was kind of perfect. The plan was laid out. There was some conversation between us all, and then everyone flew into action.
I love it how you snuck down those stairs and turned the corner. You saw
We
the
did a
glow
bit of
of the
creeping, didn't
fire.
we?
You
Yeah.
managed to pass your stealth checks enough to get a peek around the corner. I saw there was a tiny little campfire burning, which then the sorcerer decided to snuff out for a moment.
Yeah, the kind of misdirection and
gave you the jump on gave you the jump on them in that round, didn't it?
Yeah, we got some extra damage done in that time. We got in there and laid about them. So I think we actually we all kind of shared out the time we had. I don't think anyone like hogged the table in that way. That can sometimes happen, and sometimes that's fine. But I think everyone was a character. None of our characters were kind of shy or introverted types. So everyone needed to have the chance to do their actions, say their lines.
And even our new players, bless their hearts, they've got as involved as you guys did.
They did,
At the beginning, of course, as you can expect, there was a small amount of coaxing required, but that was only really at the first moments of the game itself. And by that point,
they fit in really neatly. Yeah, it was really good. Yeah, it sounds like through this discussion that you were able to achieve the kind of goals you set out as a games master to craft this adventure to work for both new and old players.
Yeah.
Obviously, with a game of Dungeons and Dragons, the work of the games master there, the GM, you obviously have to do a lot of groundwork and a lot of preparation. You have to kind of get things ready for eventualities where a single member of the party just goes, right, I'm going left while all you go right.
Yeah, so there's always little things you can do as a GM to say, well, actually, that's fine. That's absolutely perfect. You can do that. That sounds great, without actually writing down every eventuality, which of course is impossible.
Yeah.
In a game of D&D, you sort of have some ideas of what a player might want to do or what they might do that could differ from the rest of the party. Generally speaking, though, most parties work in sync and they don't create too many awkward problems for a GM. But story it up, flavor it up off on the fly, or just say, sure, fine, go ahead, do that. And if that leads their character into danger and eventual death,
so be it.
So be it.
So be it. So bearing all that in mind, were you sort of able to kind of achieve your games master's goals with the setting? Do you think you got across the story that you wanted to get across? Did did the whole adventure take the sort of shape you were sort of expecting, or did it go wildly out of shape?
No, I think actually that the my goals. I don't really know. I mean, there are some innate goals as a GM, right? And that is that every player needs to have a good time, right?
Absolutely.
And the proof in that is if a player turns around to you and says, "I'd really love to play again. That was great."
You've done a good deed, haven't you?
That's what you want to hear as a games master. But there are other goals I think involved when you're running a game. You want to see that your story makes sense. First of all, you want to see that your characters that you're writing, your non-player characters, your NPCs, you want them to have enough character about them, enough substance to them that they're both believable, and on whatever side of likable you fall, so that you could really like this guy or you could really hate this guy,
hate them.
Whether that be a friendly NPC in a inn or the villain. You need to be able to get that across.
A good emotional reaction. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, and I think from the impression that I got during the game, I felt like everybody they enjoyed the game to the point where they said, oh yeah, I'd like to play again. Very wonderful to hear.
Lovely to hear.
Great that they had a good time.
Yeah.
But I think also that the story was good enough that it got them hooked quick enough. And the non-player characters were all interacted with in ways that I had somewhat anticipated.
Hoped as well.
Yeah, and hoped. That's right. And so obviously there was a backstory to it, that you just signed up to a mercenary army, and you were assigned. You were the Red Sash mercenaries. You were assigned to this particular area to look out for whatever trouble might befall. And of course, the game began with you all meeting your end at the gallows, didn't it?
Yeah.
Without going too far into the story, because I could be here for hours. The story came to its eventual conclusion. The story ended where it began. So that it closed. That loop was closed. That circle was closed by the end of the game, and so that in itself was a goal. Can we get to the end of this story? Because this was written as a one shot, which means it's got to start and end in the space of this time frame,
which was really cool.
Which can be quite awkward because you never know how long each encounter will take, because each encounter really will take as long as it has to. Not just the rolling of dice, but certainly the interaction of the players with the surroundings.
What the players do,
how much they want to investigate a room. So how much stuff do I put in every room that makes them want to look at it? If I just overload it with tons and tons of boxes and crates and barrels and old bags, of course you're going to look in every single one of them. So I just don't write that in then. So
not today.
So the element of putting those controls in place, it was nice to see. So for me personally, getting to the end of the story and seeing it reach its conclusion and having everybody say, wow, at the end of it, that was my goal really. And that was achieved, I think.
You achieved it in stellar fashion, Burlokk.
It
was really, really good. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, since it was a one-shot game, it's interesting for me to hear it from a player's perspective, really, since we're in our debrief stage. Having played your character then for that period of that one shot, how do you find that your experience of a one shot differs from a campaign? How do you find that the role playing and the mindset you have playing a character differs from your one shot to a campaign?
So I think that there is a great deal of difference how you might decide to play a character differently, knowing that in a one shot, this character exists probably for 2, 3, maybe a long one, 4 hours or something like this. So you have to cram a lot more in. I think for myself, you have to consider a character that is less subtle than one you might like to play over, say, weeks or months.
Yeah.
Because you don't have the time to layer up all the complexities of your character. I don't think that stops you playing a kind of a more detailed, less obvious character in a one shot. But for me, I really wanted to play something that people could quite quickly understand what this guy was about, what he did, how he looked, how he might act in certain situations. So I chose a character that befit a one shot. I mean, I totally could take that character into a campaign setting, but I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't choose a character like that for
Yeah.
a campaign, because I think over time, because for me anyway, he was quite a sort of like a one-trick type character.
Yeah.
I mean, no one wants to see a satyr suddenly become sober and
No.
unloving of dancing, song, and combat, and all those sort of things.
That's no
So
satyr I've ever known.
that's no satyr. You know, that just becomes a boring, sad goat boy. I mean, I might like to play that character a little bit sometimes, but
It's the long term. That's the slow burn character, isn't it?
yeah. But that is the point. Actually, I think it is for a campaign. I would definitely go for a character who I know had some mileage, who you could flesh out. You might work a few deeper kind of faults and flaws into his character, whereas this, the satyr there, I just wanted him just to go straight in, and in that way, it's quite liberating to play in a one shot, because the character was just straightforward and just fun.
Yeah.
I thought so. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
The way the story ended,
Could go on.
I mean, it was left at a point where, if, for example, everybody around the table sends me a message or gets in touch and says, "Can we go again? You know, can we?"
I've already sent it, Burlokk. Did you not?
I didn't get the memo. Says to me, "I'd really like to do that again. You know, I want to."
Mhm.
Okay, great. And if it turns out that everybody actually wouldn't mind playing that same character again, we can literally just
I think
pick
they
up
would.
from a point where we left off. And
Yeah,
at that stage, maybe you could then think, well, all right, then let's use what we've already got as a base for a character. And you
yeah,
can almost go through a little bit of that character creation stage again, just to add a
yeah.
few extra little layers. But certainly a lot of involvement with the GM. You know, you can sit down with me and say, what I'd like is this, like this, like this. Can that work into whatever potential story we've got?
Yeah.
And that's the process you would have, as you've outlined, you would have done from the beginning had it been a campaign setting.
That for me was the most important consideration with the difference between the two. It
Yeah.
was just making a character that kind of fit for the short amount of time and kind of get the most sort of bang for your buck. And it was kind of liberating and felt really free to be able to do that.
Yeah. But so, I mean, in summary, I suppose you had a good time.
In summary,
it was all right.
It was a bloody success.
Oh. Welcome back, folks. This is where the magic happens.
Yeah, it is. It is. So, yeah, this is the segment where we're going to dismantle, tear apart, otherwise discuss a Magic the Gathering card selected by one of our fine viewers, listeners.
Maybe they both listen and view.
Yeah, that would be a joy. That would be a joy.
You both subscribe if you haven't subscribed, all you listeners out there. We have got a YouTube channel as well. So
please do. Yeah. Then you can see our faces and see some of the pretty little pictures that we throw up occasionally. You just get a better feel for the whole situation. Although I think our voices might soothe some people to sleep, podcast style. What do you reckon?
I very often fall asleep to the sound of your dulcet tones, Grumsworth.
Yes, when I'm stood in front of you. I've noted it, Burlokk. I've noted
Leaning over me menacingly.
That's right. A little bit. This has come to us courtesy of Alkaline Banana. Pretty strong name. Not entirely sure what it implies, but, you know, I look forward to finding out, right?
Yeah.
This absolute treat of a card there. You've got this up?
So I have, yeah. Look at that.
Nice. So this fellow is from the Morningtide set. It is a white card we've got here. It is called the Shine Wend. Now, before we go into anything else about it, do you just want to describe visually what this is? Don't go into detail, just first impressions.
A flying lamb.
It's a flying lamb. That's what we've got here, folks. A flying lamb. Yeah, so what we've got here, artwork-wise, we've got some sort of incorporeal lamb sitting centre stage, semi-see-through sort of creature. We've got some little see-through glassy butterfly wings sprouting from its funny little lamby back. There are stars everywhere. There's kind of a big flow of colour from this thing. And it's got butterfly wings, hasn't it, as well?
Behind its sort of, behind its glassy fairy wings comes a huge sort of cascade of colour from the red. Almost, I think it's like is it a red admiral?
Something like
butterfly,
that. Yeah.
very similar to that, very akin to the Red Admiral butterfly from behind those. And then beyond that, it's got another set of wings.
So looking at this, I'm wondering whether there are multiple creatures here, right? Because the angle of this second set of wings corresponds with this sort of grown-up lamb's face popping out the side of our
Just
central
behind it,
character.
yeah.
You see that, yeah?
Yeah, I can't tell if that's almost some sort of reflection, perhaps,
Sort of
of what the
echo
lamb
of it,
may well
maybe.
be one day. Perhaps an
Yeah.
echo through
like
time
that.
or something,
Yeah.
or a reflection through time.
Yeah.
Some sort
Sort
of
of a
hole
a sort of
in the
bubbling
cosmos.
void, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, there's no real sense of where this is taking place, where this lamb's come from, it's not
Not
even
at
a lamb,
all.
it's an
No.
elemental, isn't it? It's a
No.
creature, an
It
elemental
is,
creature.
yeah.
It seems strange that it doesn't have any place in the world. It's not grounded anywhere, is it? This is almost dreamlike.
Yeah.
I think this is quite
Yeah, I agree.
quite typical of Therese Nielsen's work, who's the artist who's done this. She manages to pull these kind of very dreamlike pictures off that don't have a great deal of landscape going on with them, but it very much allows you to tell a story. Really,
it is. Again, there is some sort of abstract about it. I really like the way, although we can't place exactly where this spectral lamb creature, the Shine Wend, actually is located.
Yeah,
we're getting some sort of interesting stuff. We've got a little moon popping out, crescent-like, above its head.
That's right. Yeah, like a halo.
Scattering of stars. It is kind of Halo-esque, which...
As if this thing is pure and...
Yeah, there's some divinity maybe going on. It is a white card.
Yeah, I was going to say, that could reflect the fact it's within the white of the colour pie.
And it is an elemental. So it may be an elemental of divine light.
Absolutely.
A little glowing lamb. What could be better?
Right for the
Stick
slaughter.
a couple of bones.
I don't know.
It's right for the slaughter, which is sad, but it does look like there's a sort of grown-up lamb, what most people might call a sheep. Poking its little head out the side there.
Now, would you say it's a lamb, or would you say it's like the calf of a cow?
No, this is...
At first glance, I thought lamb because it's white and fluffy, but then the fact that this other face, it's actually a cow's head.
Proper bovine, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
It could well be a lamb. It might be a lamb and a cow.
Classification of young livestock, but I like it to be a lamb.
I do, yeah. I think so. The colours are good. I think I like the fact it goes the bright orange red of the wings. There's a pinky purple colour in this twisting and cycling cosmic kind of field that this thing's coming out of.
Yeah.
There's like a white green
really like that.
From this gap in the ground or gap in the void that this thing's has been thrown out from, and there's a bright green of the large wings.
We've really got a bit of everything on there colour-wise, I would say.
Yeah,
it's interesting that it's slightly kind of washed out, a little bit muted, isn't it?
Almost faded.
Do you think?
Yeah, faded. I think that adds to the incorporeal nature of this creature that you're talking about, doesn't it? Yeah, nothing's particularly clarified, is it?
It's very vague. I almost think the stars, the bright kind of glimmer of them, are the things that give it its context. It's kind of astral.
Yeah, this could be something space-like, or something that lives in a realm between material and perhaps from some sort of heavenly place. I mean, moving away from the artwork, as much as I'd like to talk more about it, I think the mechanics
could do for many years. So
we probably could. The mechanics and the rules relating to this elemental creature. It's a common card.
It's an interesting one,
isn't it?
Yeah, it is common. Yeah,
and for a common card to have this much rules text on it is quite unusual. So it's a creature elemental. It's actually a 0/0, which means it's got no toughness, no power, no stats. So if you were to have a 0/0 creature, as soon as it entered the battlefield, it would die. So to stop that happening, the rules say that when Shine Wend comes into play, it comes in with a +1/+1 counter on it. So it becomes a 1/1 flying elemental creature.
Yeah,
that
nice and straightforward.
Yeah, nice and straightforward, exactly. And it also has another set of text underneath that saying for this only costs 2 mana, by the way, 1 generic and 1 white. So it costs you 2 mana to play it. And as part of its rules text, it says for 1 generic and 1 white, so again 2 mana, you get to remove a +1/+1 counter from Shine Wend, to destroy a target enchantment.
What do you think to that?
I think it's interesting in the fact that it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to destroy. If you just had a single +1/+1 counter on this creature, and then you use that ability to remove that counter, of course, it would kill the creature. So you would sacrifice.
It's a sacrifice, yeah.
You would sacrifice the lamb, right? So
yeah.
So you'd sacrifice it, but you could also obviously you could have any number of cards in your deck that allow you to plow a lot more +1/+1 counters onto your
push
creatures.
counters onto it. Yeah,
and that's a very viable build within Magic. Is the counters build. So you can have plenty of cards that could make this creature quite large with multiple +1/+1 counters on it, and then that allows this lamb to essentially be a battery of anti-enchantment. Abilities, so you can use it over and over again.
Yeah, so if you are running that sort of deck, if you have got something that relentlessly stacks counters, this creature becomes kind of a lamb-like artillery piece, which just robs your opponent of their enchantments for a very small amount of mana, and does not tap to do so, does it?
No, so you can just, the only cost is 2 mana and you remove a counter. So you can do that as many times as you like in your go, provided you can pay for it.
So this magical little lamb sweeping across them, just, absorbing.
Do you think it's got some sort of white energy flowing from it? Or into it, perhaps. So I don't know how I imagine this creature to be destroying these enchantments from a narrative point of view. Maybe it's absorbing them into its young chest there, like it's got, or it could be gusting the enchantments away with its mighty wings.
It does look. It looks like it could be any of those sort of things, or all this kind of enchantment destruction.
Yeah.
This might be what we're seeing around it.
That could be it. Yeah.
Why the world looks kind of star-crossed and detailed with all this psychedelia.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I quite like the way that this card almost tells you a picture, gives you a picture of what might be. As if when it comes into play with a +1/+1 counter, it just has those tiny little wings, those one-use fairy wings. But it gets another +1/+1 counter on it, becomes stronger, more powerful. And then it gets another +1/+1 counter. It becomes this giant winged lamb that could potentially then be that larger bovine creature in the distance. So it almost like it's an abstract tale of what could be future, past, present, all in one.
All wrapped up in a tiny little livestock critter, which I think is really cute.
A livestock critter,
But also the card looks beautiful. Yeah, it's been a really interesting one to unpack, actually, isn't it? And it's quite playable, right?
Cute but chaotic, and yes, I think playable, certainly. I mean, for me, I reckon if I had to put it out of 10, I reckon I'd put it out of 7, to be honest with you.
Wow, okay.
I quite like this. If the build's got to be right, so you've got to have lots of support cards for it. This would probably be a sideboard card for me if I'm playing a deck that uses lots of +1/+1 counters. If I come up against a deck that's using lots of enchantments, potentially has lots of enchantment creatures. This could be
that's a good shout.
Of course, destroy target enchantment. If you've got the ability to destroy enchantments, that could also be an enchantment creature. A lot of those in a Theros block. So if this creature was to be in my sideboard, there's my removal for a lot of the enemy's threats. So this would probably be something I would for cheap as well. And it comes baked in with evasion because it comes with flying. So it's instantly you've got value there.
Yeah, really good.
So I'd probably give it about 7 out of 10, specifically in a sideboard and with a deck that deals with the mechanic of gaining +1/+1 counters. But certainly 7 out of 10. And I mean, any card by Therese Nielsen, in my opinion, is just gold because she's a fabulous artist. She's done absolutely amazing work, as she always does with her Magic cards.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. Imagine that thing blown up on the size that it was sort of painted at or crafted at.
I wonder what size it was when it was originally done.
Imagine having it on your living room wall, bigger than you and I stood on each other's shoulders.
On the ceiling.
Yeah, would you? Huge, great astral lamb butterfly beast looking down on you. Yeah,
it's very, very pretty. And Therese Nielsen being one of the sweethearts of the Magic community. Everybody loves her work. So great job, Therese, as always. Perfect job.
Nicely done. Yeah, we'll give her a big old nod, won't we? A big nod. And thank you to the Alkaline Banana for providing us with this with this fine Shine Wend.
Thank you, Alkaline Banana. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it was a right treat.
Grumsworth,
Burlokk.
I come bearing tidings.
Tidings? Tidings of what sort?
That our time is drifting close to the end.
Oh no!
Like the Shine Wend approaches on the horizon, ready to sweep us away like an enchantment.
I was going to say, does it come to destroy our enchantments? Yeah. I always knew I'd end at the hands of a lamb. I knew it.
That's it.
I mean, it's probably Father Time again, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. We're going to have to get ready to say our goodbyes to all of our wonderful listeners, wonderful viewers. It's been good fun once again to bring you another episode of the Preamble.
Yeah.
How have you found today?
Treat. Are you asking me or the viewers, Burlokk?
Maybe a bit of both. How have you found today? Let us know. Send us an email.
Yeah, let us know.
Our details are below us. You can send us an email. You can get in touch with us on our YouTube comments. Drop a comment there if you need to. You can catch us on Instagram and on Twitter and on Facebook. We're all on there at the Preamble. Yeah, so I think that gives us one last order of business.
One last duty, isn't it?
Yeah. And that is our typical quote that we leave you fair folk with as we depart from your lives on this day.
I mean, hopefully you'll come back and let us back into your lives on another day. But, you know, we're not
pushy.
We're not too... Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Let us in if you fancy it. If not...
Yeah, we don't come banging on doors. We knock gently.
We do. Thrice. Yeah.
3 small knocks.
Okay, then. I'm going to bid you all fair evening. I hope you've all enjoyed this. Tune in next week for the next one. Hopefully we'll have some more interesting hobby-based situations to discuss with you. Yeah, we'll find another magic card to take a look at. Burlokk, if you'd like to do us the honours with your finely selected quotes to take us and all of our fine listeners home.
This comes from a book, The Space Wolves Codex. And I will read you a small excerpt. And this is entitled The Last Words of Layman Russ, the Primarch of the Space Wolves chapter.
Listen but closely, brothers, for my life's breath is all but spent. There shall come a time, far from now, when our chapter itself is dying, even as I am now dying, and our foes shall gather to destroy us. Then, my children, I shall listen for your call, in whatever realm of death holds me, and come I shall, no matter what the laws of life and death forbid. At the end, I will be there for the final battle, for the wolf time.
You've been listening to The Preamble. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, and many other podcast platforms. And if you want to contact us, just send an email to thepreamble@gmail.com or find us at The Preamble on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Your hosts were Grumsworth and Burlokk, brought to you by roguesgaming.com. Special thanks to our contributors, our spotlight artist, and of course, to all of you. See you next time.